Good evening and welcome to the January 9th Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Today we'll call the meeting to order, and with that, could you do the roll, please?
George Piper.
Here.
Casey Sampson.
Present.
Linda Ridgway. Here. Scott Sewell.
Present.
And Nicole Weddington.
I believe she was absent. So that we do have a quorum to conduct business. I would like to seek a motion to table the election of officers until next meeting. We have some further discussion on the roles and that. We're going to meet. A motion?
I move we table.
Motion and a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And that approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes? And we'll seek a motion to approve the minutes as well.
So moved.
Motion and a second?
Second.
Scott? Any other discussion on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And no old business, so we'll move right into new business with our certificate of appropriateness. And Derek, have a report?
Yep. We have a few certificate of appropriateness applications tonight. One is kind of a big picture application. One is completely standalone, separate, and we'll start with that one. Scott and Mitzi Riddle is the applicant at 107 North Meridian Street here in Lebanon. Their property is in the Central Business Zoning District, and this property has not been before the HPC. It is a contributing building and is in the National Register of Historic Places Courthouse Square Historic District. The application tonight for certificate of appropriateness, is a new awning that was installed. So a new awning takes commission approval, and awning replacement staff is able to approve. So this is a new awning. The awning was in process of being installed when I was called by one of the neighboring building owners, and I immediately went up to talk to Mitzi, and she was extremely apologetic. Just one of those things where she didn't know it was one of a piece that needed an application. So she filled out the application immediately, got me the renderings immediately, and was very easy to work with. Nonetheless, it is an after-the-fact certificate of appropriateness tonight. So I did include a picture of what the awning, the installed awning, in case you haven't seen it. If the crew could put it up on the TV, there it is. That is the awning installed above the Freestyle Academy for Hair. Oops, get back to my staff report, sorry. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness to install a new awning. The applicant, as I mentioned, installed the awning without knowing it required approvals. In general, awnings are encouraged in our district. The guidelines say an awning which is most appropriate would be a one-to-one awning. A one-to-one awning is potentially pretty far out there into our right-of-way. It doesn't say that it must be a one-to-one, but a one-to-one would have been what would have most likely been installed historically. This awning is not that. It's a very, very steep awning, but in my opinion would be an appropriate awning. Staff believes the awning does not have a negative effect to the historic nature of the structure, and staff recommends approval of the COA tonight for the awning. The applicant is not here. I think something popped up and they weren't able to make it. So if there's any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to if I know the answer.
Okay, thank you. Any question for Derek, staff? I personally think it complements the downtown well, and her quickness in filling out the application as soon as she found out showed due diligence on her part. So with that, I would seek a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness as submitted.
Just a question for staff real quick. Have they owned the building for a while, or?
Yeah, they've owned it for some time. It is my understanding is it's a place where young people learn the trade of, I don't even know what the PC term would be for it these days, how to cut hair, cosmetology, I'm not sure, but they are taught the art of making people and their hair look good, so.
I mean, I know that, building owners in the past have been sent letters just informing them they're in the district and things like that. I didn't know if is there a policy or is there a way, if there are new owners, I mean, that's not the case here, but if there are new building owners, that they can somehow be informed or let known what the requirements are for the district?
Yeah, George, you bring up a good point. I thought about that today, and it's definitely on my list. It's just to blast out a general letter to the entire district at this point. Just remind people that they are in the district, and certain things do require a second set of eyes looking at it for approval. And it's best, just like even with our zoning applications, it's best to call our office and see what's needed. So I intend to do that here, before the next meeting, actually.
Yeah, because I thought, didn't we send one out maybe 2017, I'm thinking?
Oh,
somewhere in that
probably
time
somewhere
frame?
around there. Yeah, and they've owned it since then. The letter could be 20 pages long. It could go into every detail on what's required and what isn't. I honestly believe this was just a simple mistake where they thought it's an awning. It's, awnings were there in the past, and why would you need a COA for an awning? So, I think that's simply what it is.
All right.
Okay. So,
I will, if there's no other discussion, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the COA for the awning.
okay, we have a motion and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right,
Aye.
carries. Thank you. And let's see, now we are on to the second COA.
Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. So,
Of many.
somewhere around there. So this application is a pretty detailed application. It's an application that's been going back and forth for a good amount of time on what the scope was going to look like. The applicant, Forza, has finally landed on something they're comfortable with and are ready to move forward. So this is just the first step in many approvals along the way, but getting HPC approval for the basic design of the facade of the building is best to start when we're dealing in the district. So this is a pretty unique application. There are lots of moving parts to it. As I mentioned, there's several COA applications, but they're all in general pointing towards one redevelopment of a section of South Lebanon Street, both sides of the street. Best way to describe it is probably a half block or so of each side. So the first, well, I'm kind of lost for words here. I don't know where you want me to start. We can start on the Estes side, which makes sense kind of to me, or if you want to start on the New Life side, I can go through all of them at once. We can kind of break it down to one side and the other, and go from there. You tell me how you want me to start.
I think the agenda, how written, is it 309 South, that would be the Bill Estes, or the Bill Estes building, would be correct?
Well, let's start there. So 309 South Lebanon Street, some of us know it as the Kincaid Dodge dealership. Some of us know it more recently as the Estes Dodge dealership. But now the city owns the property. So this property has been talked about for redevelopment. It's been looked at as far as reuse, what could be repurposed in the building, what structurally is left of the building. The city and Forza has also had structural engineers into this building to assess it, to see how viable it would be to try to save some of the facade and build on the backside of it. Let me start with my staff report here. Again, this is 309 South Lebanon Street. The property, again, is zoned central business, and this property has not been before the HPC previously. It is a contributing building, a building which is less than 50 years old and which is compatible with its historic surroundings, or a building which is over 40 years old whose historic character remains but does not rise to the level of notable or outstanding. This property is included in the National Register Historic District. The certificate of appropriate tonight is for demolition and construction of a new parking lot. I want to let you know that the plan for the parking lot is just kind of a holding place until further redevelopment is ready. And I can kind of talk about that as we go along here in this application. But demolition, as you know, requires commission approval. This property is currently owned by the Lebanon Community Development Corporation. So technically, the city of Lebanon is the applicant in this case. The property is being offered to Forza Development for use to meet required parking regulations related to the development on the west side of South Lebanon Street. Use of the site as parking is proposed to be temporary in nature, as I mentioned. The grand scheme is that once the west side gets developed, at some point the east side does as well. As the corridor experiences further development, a future building will be constructed at this site. The intention will be to closely match the proposed building on the west side of Lebanon Street. Again, this is all tying together, so I may repeat myself several times here, and I apologize if I do. The Lebanon Community Development Corporation will retain ownership of the property after demolition until such time a building is proposed. That's more or less just an insurance policy so that if, God forbid something happens, the economy crashes, whatever the case is, we have to back up and punt and find a new developer. We still have control of that in the future. Right now the plan is, all goes well and Forza jumps from one side of the street to the other. This site has been heavily manipulated over the years. The original street level storefront was replaced with a modern storefront glass and added on the south side. Additions have been made to the structure to accommodate modern car dealership needs, which is, kind of a combination of several different types of construction, pole barn, some modern CMU block, a little bit of everything. The structure has been altered in such a way that it has lost most of its historical character. The only element of the building which potentially holds any historical significance is the second floor brick, which again, according to the structural engineers we had assessed the property is, one swing of a hammer the wrong way from possibly, falling into Lebanon Street if you go down that path of trying to save it. And if you go down that path of trying to save it and not have it fall into Lebanon Street, you're talking about some pretty major dollars, which then you start to get into the economics of whether it's worth it or not, and whether somebody could do that and operate in the black and not in the red. In terms of putting the current structure to a reasonable economic use, it has been proven to be cost prohibitive. The Downtown Lebanon Action Plan, and again I'll refer to this several times in all of these proposals, was a plan that was adopted about the time that we adopted the grand scheme of things for the redevelopment of the square, the streetscape redevelopment of the square, the trail extension. And that plan was adopted by the City Council in June of 2017. And in that plan, which is in your staff report, it identifies this particular block-ish on South Road 39, south of State Road 32 to Superior Street, east and west side of Lebanon Street, as an area best suited for redevelopment with mixed-use buildings. So the proposal tonight fits in line with that action plan that, again, was officially adopted. The rating map for the district is also attached to this staff report, and I've mentioned it several times over the last few months that I think there's some arguments on how some of these buildings have been rated, on whether there's any historical characteristics left of them, and this one's one of those borderline gradings in my opinion. Demolition in the historic district, is something should not be taken lightly. And I'm not saying you should just roll over and approve this. It's something we should all think about, and it has to be a solid application, and I believe this is a solid application. In this area of the district, this building is surrounded by non-contributing buildings, and the building itself, arguably, as I said, should be graded non-contributing in staff's opinion instead of contributing. For this area to improve and become the gateway into our core district, and historic in its own right, I think we're building some history as we go along here. The buildings in this area, in staff's opinion, should be considered for demolition. Staff recommends approval of the COA application for demolition and redevelopment of a parking lot on 309 South Lebanon Street. And I do have, well, there it is, which you have in your packet, but I'm happy to put up on the screen for the general public. you take a look at. The proposed parking lot, so you can kind of see it overlaid on top of the site here, and it is, nothing too exciting, but it is a parking lot, again, for what we view as right now kind of a temporary holding place. The current structure, there's also pictures of those that I'm happy to show, which I believe are in your packet. But again, we can show everyone at home so they know exactly what we're dealing with here, if it loads. Maybe. Or not. We seem to be locked up here. Not going to come up. So yeah, I think you all know what the SS building looks like. I think you all know what brick remains. So we can pause here. You can ask some questions if you'd like on this particular application, or I can keep going on the others if you'd like.
Well, with the parking, would that essentially be a municipal lot? So free parking for whomever, or is it designated for anything in particular?
It is going to be used currently for primarily the site that's on the west side of the road to meet the parking requirements. At such time that site develops, there will be a condition that other parking arrangements are made to accommodate the parking. That's one thing. I've certainly brought a whole team of people here that have been involved with this project tonight. Mayor Gentry is here, Ben Bontrager, our city planner, and several Forza people are here as well. Again, these conversations have been ongoing for, 24 months, maybe, somewhere around there. Quite a long time. They've been a moving target. So, the question about whether it's free-for-all parking, I'm going to bring up my team members here, and they can speak to that.
Yeah, so just to kind of fill in a little bit of the details, so the city will retain ownership of the property. We're essentially granting them permission to use it for parking, but that will be a parking lot that's designated for use by users, tenants of the development on the west side of the road. So if by chance there's more parking than they need for their development, we might be able to designate some for public parking, but for right now, it would be a parking lot designated for that use across the street.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Mr. Mayor Gentry?
Yeah, and I would just say too, I think, as part of the, we really want to incentivize a mixed-use development here, so that would include restaurants, retail. So that's what the parking lot would serve as well too. So from a functional standpoint, I'm not sure if people may understand that it's not necessarily a quote-unquote public lot, whereas the determined parking has associated with the property across the street. Now, again, we see this as more of a temporary condition. We have been exploring parking solutions for downtown core. So we kind of see this as almost a half step to, once development makes sense on the eastern side of 39, that would require some sort of parking structure, which then would be able to serve the downtown and a larger area in future developments as well too. So it kind of is like I said, a half step to kind of get us towards a larger kind of, again, straightforward type development like we used to see down Lebanon Street in that area.
And I mean, this isn't really an HPC question, but I guess with the parking lot there, would there be a crosswalk or something kind of at that area for folks crossing? I mean, it's a state highway, so I know there's probably some different conversations that have to be taking place there.
Correct. So yeah, it is a state road, so we would need to go through an NDOT process. If you notice that area there is a little bit wider there, so we would like to kind of explore an option of a pedestrian island type signalized, not a stoplight there, but some sort of flashing light, kind of what we've seen on Main Street, where we do have maybe someone can activate a kind of a pedestrian signal there and say, hey, we are crossing the street here, because we do want to make sure we provide a crossing there, but also want to, if there's no one there, we don't want people stopping. Right. So some type of within, yes.
And this will appear permanent in nature, even though it is temporary. It's not going to be a gravel lot. It's going to be paved and have curbs and everything.
Correct. Yeah, it'll meet our standards from a parking lot standpoint, but we see this as kind of it will be a permanent lot to our current standards, but It's not it's much easier to one day take that away and build another building there too, if we need to. So it's not and it provides the parking to make the development on the west side work, so.
Just to build off of that, we have a development agreement that we're working on finalizing with Forza, and it's actually a condition of the agreement that we jointly pursue the crosswalk with NDOT. So that is definitely something that both the city and the developer think is a necessity. So, and yes, just to reiterate, that in the agreement, it suggests that it's the cost to develop the parking lot are on the developer, and they will meet all the appropriate standards of the central business district for parking lots.
As far as the timeline, are we going to see the Kincaid building taken down and a parking lot created, and maybe months later the other come down, or is it all kind of at the same time?
We'll probably want to let the applicant discuss the timing. I do see that it probably will be a joint demo on both sides of the road. I mean, if you're gonna get a demo crew out there,
Yeah, sounds good.
it makes sense to try to get it all at the same time while they're doing it. But in terms of the timing when it would start, I mean, certainly would have liked to have started already, but we're hoping we're getting close.
Okay, I think the scope of this COA is strictly just the demolition. So is there any other questions regarding the appropriateness of the demolition on this building in the historic district? I know, just to make a comment, it's kind of ironic to be in a historic preservation and demoing a building to put a parking lot. I never thought I'd do that, but I think this is a very important step to our downtown. And I think it's also nice that it is the first step we're doing tonight, because it's that one step that we can make into the right direction of making this core, like Mayor Gentry said, what it used to be 100 years ago. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the first COA as written.
I make a motion to approve the COA as presented tonight.
A motion and a second. I seek a second.
Second?
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And so now, Derek, on to the second of, well, I guess technically the third COA.
Yep, so
Second
this
in
is
a row.
another, we'll start, in order to get to the next part of this application, which is an infill project. There is a building proposed after this demolition. We have to approve the demolition first, and then we can approve the infill after. So, one thing I want to do before we get started here, as I mentioned when I first got into this application, the scope of this thing has changed. It's been a moving target ever since we started conversation with the developer on this. And what they landed on, I've been asked several times. I know some other people have as well. So if they could put this up on the screen for me, that'd be great. This is the actual project limits of the application that we're going to talk about next. It is the New Life buildings, the buildings owned previously by the New Life South, for the most part. It does not include Club 39, it does not include Becca's, it does not include Buy Right, it does not include Modern Barbershop. So it is the buildings, again, formerly owned by New Life, and the parking lot, which was the staging area for the downtown activity reconstruction lately, which again, at this point, is part of the Estes property that we bought. So that is a form of the partnership here that we have with Forza to allow them, with some incentive packages. Again, Ben and the mayor can talk about that after I present, but for them to use that parking lot as part of this development for what they're proposing. So I want to start with that, just to make sure that everybody was clear on what the project limits for this next application is. Okay, next application, again, we're going to start with the demo side of things, is 222 and 224 South Lebanon Street. We will start with 222. Although they're owned by the same group and previously were owned by the same group, 222, it has not been used in some time. 222 would be the more conventional historic building side of things. So this is the north side of the New Life development. 222 South Lebanon Street is the address. Again, most of the things we're going to deal with are in the central business district, so sound like a broken record there. And this property has not been before the HPC. This particular building is one of those that, again, I'd say it's borderline the way it's currently graded, but it is a contributing building, same as the last. A building which is less than 50 years old and which is compatible with the historic surroundings, or a building which is over 40 years old and whose historic character remains. That would be the part I would particularly debate on this property. There are some elements of the building that remain, but much of it has been manipulated. And this building is in the district, National Register Historic District. The certificate of appropriateness is for demolition. And again, this is going to be very similar to the analysis from the 309 South Lebanon Street and for the next one as well, but I will go through it just to make sure it's in the record. Demolition, again, requires commission approval. This property is currently owned by Forza Development, LLC. Now, this building has been unused since somewhere around 2002. Staff has been inside of the structure, and it appears to be in a structurally dilapidated state. New Life was never able to use it because of egress issues to meet fire code. So it has sat there for some time in disrepair. Remains of the original accent materials from the original facade remain, but most of the materials have been replaced with very, very poor materials, some materials that are not meant for exterior applications. The structure to the south is a modern block building, which again will be the next demo application, and it is rated non-contributing. The facade of the building to the north was completely, the facade of the building to the north was completely renovated using modern brick, the one we're talking about now, and is rated again, contributing. Like the Estes building, this structure would take an investment so large to make the property usable, the economics would be very unlikely to ever work positively. In many of these cases, economics is one of the reasons to approve demolition COA. This particular building is one of the traditional, 20-foot wide buildings. From previous experience in the activity that's happening right now in our district, we're talking about a number with lots of zeros behind it, and the space doesn't support those zeros. Again, this falls into the action plan area where the council adopted in June of 17 that this is a site best suited for redevelopment. Let's see here, in this area of the district, this building is surrounded again by non-contributing buildings, and the building itself arguably should have been graded non-contributing. For this area to improve the gateway into our district and historic in its own right, again, the building in this area should be considered for demolition. Staff recommends approval of the COA application for demolition. And this might be a time where the Forza team has their architect here with them tonight, who has a lot of historic architect experience. And if somebody from the Forza team would like to come up and speak about the current condition, other than what you've heard in the staff report, they do have people there to answer the question here tonight about that.
Okay. Are there any questions right off the bat? I think we're well familiar with this property and the state that it's in. Again, this is one of those where we don't expect to tear down a building, but it's in the best interest, I believe, for our district. So if there's no other discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the COA as submitted for the 222 or 224.
I'm sorry, 220. We're starting with 222.
222, okay, I was correct. It's for the 222 South Lebanon Street.
I'll make a motion to approve the COA for the demolition.
Motion?
Second.
Second?
Casey?
Yes?
I'm sorry, before you take a vote, I know there are some neighbors here. If you want to open the floor for them to.
I apologize, yes. Would any public comment before we take the vote?
Okay.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure. Yep.
Thank you, Derek, for pointing that out. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And I will move to the 224 COA. Demolition.
One more demolition to consider here. And again, my sigh is because it isn't something that should be taken lightly, and it should be a solid application behind it to consider it. So this building, again, owned by Forza Development, LLC, 224 South Lebanon Street, zoned central business, has not been before the HPC. This particular building is graded correctly, in my opinion, non-contributing. A building which is less than 50 years old and is incompatible with its historic surroundings, or a building which is over 40 years old and that has been altered in such a way that it has lost its historic character. This one, again, just because of the area it is in the National Register of Historic Places District. Certificate of appropriateness tonight for this particular address is demolition. Many of the same comments. Demolition requires commission approval. This demolition proposal is related to the overall development application of this area, and again is in the same particular area in the downtown action plan that identifies it best suited for redevelopment. And with that, this one's pretty short and sweet. Being a non-contributing building, staff recommends approval of the COA application for demolition.
Okay, any questions on this COA? Feel like a broken record tonight, but with that, we'll seek a motion to entertain a motion to approve the COA for 224 South Lebanon Street demolition.
So moved?
A motion,
Second.
second. Any public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, and now we get to the fun stuff.
On to the fun stuff. Or the exciting stuff, I should say. How about that? Okay, so with the demolitions approved, we can move forward with the infill application portion of the evening. This includes, as I mentioned, 222, 224, and the parking lot, which has an approximate address of 310 South Lebanon Street. The project limit that I showed you earlier in red. If you'd like me to pull that up again, I can, or we're all clear on that. Okay. These properties have been before the HPC and have been approved for demolition COA. There are no structures, theoretically, on these parcels, and these parcels are in the National Register District. Certificate of appropriate tonight is for Infill Development. This application for redevelopment is of a mixed-use 4-story structure for the most part. There is a section that does drop down to 2 stories so that it can tie in appropriately to the building to the north. And I will let certainly the professionals talk about that tonight on the necessity of that. Staff, HPC staff, planning staff, mayor's office staff, we've all had several conversations with the applicant about what this building needs to look like, and it has, kind of morphed into what we're going to present tonight. But we made the applicant clear that using brick and quality materials was the primary focus of this structure, as the primary facade materials for the street-facing elevations in particular. The buildings have been designed by RB Architects, a firm that has significant amount of experience working in historic districts. The design and rhythm of these buildings are complementary to the historic nature of the examples in our district. The proposed buildings are compatible regarding style, form, proportion, texture, and materials between historic buildings and those of contemporary design. The building is 186 feet in overall length, parallel to Lebanon Street. Of the 186 feet, 154 is 51 feet tall, with the parapet included in height. The northern 32 feet of the structure, this is the part I was talking about that drops down to a 2-story elevation, drops down to a height of 29 feet with the parapet included. These heights are relatively consistent with other buildings in the district. The Lebanon Municipal Building is 37 feet tall. The Flats, which was Infill Development approved a few years ago, is 43 feet, 4 inches to the peak. The Big Four Crossing buildings, which have been approved and are still on the table, won't go into detail on that tonight, but have a range from 37.6 to 42.8. So, in that range. It's not going to necessarily stick out like a sore thumb. The roof structure of the proposed building is flat. The storefront surroundings are constructed of a cast stone veneer. The east-facing elevation is a mix of brown, tan brick, and blonde brick, as seen in the color renderings. I think now is probably a good time to show those renderings. I'm going to pause on the staff report just to give everybody an idea of kind of put a picture with the words here. So there is the east-facing elevation, which faces Lebanon Street, which is primarily what we're talking about here currently. And then also we will be talking about the south elevation here. You can see the different color bricks in the cast veneer storefront surrounds. Let's see. There is in, we'll call it virtual reality, as you're coming south down Lebanon Street. The south-facing elevation, as I showed you, is the same brown tan brick with the westernmost portion of that elevation, 20 feet specifically, is a burnished or split-faced block. The applicant, which we talked to after they submitted, would prefer split-faced block everywhere that the CMU is proposed on this side of the elevation and the west elevation, but it's certainly open to HPC conversation tonight, so they can discuss that more when they get the podium. The west-facing elevation is a mix of, again, CMU and hardy plank panel siding. The north-facing elevation, this is the elevation which is exposed where the structure drops in height from the 4-story section down to the 2-story section. It's going to be one of those glimpses that you see if you're not paying attention while you're driving down the road at 35 miles an hour and look up and see it. So, it's going to be one of those kind of weird things, but it is exposed, so I wanted to include that tonight. Has a 10 feet back from the east elevation towards the west of brown tan brick. So it will go back a decent amount to where you're really going to have to look to see the other material that's on that elevation. Then once you get past that 10 feet from the eastern elevation, it transitions to a 8-inch hardy lap siding. And let me go back to my pictures so I can, again, put pictures with those words. So here's the rear elevation. I'm going to zoom in pretty far so you can kind of see the detail here. So on the, we'll call it the bottom third of the building, you're dealing with the CMU and access doors for the tenants in these spaces. And then the top is the hardy plank. Oop, sorry. And here is that spot that, as a driver, you probably should not be looking at, but is exposed. So the 10 feet of the brick off the eastern elevation, and then the hardy plank with an access door to the roof section of that second-story building. The redevelopment of a blighted section of the historic district has potential to have a positive, very positive impact on the district for many decades to come. Although modern, a mix of quality facade materials helps to give this structure an established presence. So it blends well. It's not going to be one of those that you drive by and like, oh, what the heck is that? Is that the, I'm going to go back to it, the cruise ship on Mass Avenue? The design is specifically complementary to the approved Big Four crossing structures and the Lebanon Municipal Building and staff's opinion. With this being a transition into the historic core, staff feels this is a quality application, and staff does recommend approval of the infill COA. I have some other elevations if you would like to see them, some floor plan elevations. So we can get these on the screen. First floor is a mix of potential restaurant and retail offices, professional offices, and then the second, third, and fourth floor are apartments. As you can see here, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom and a couple studios thrown into there on each floor.
What is, I'm just curious on that elevation, where it said second, third, and the fourth floor, and then it said second floor only. It may be technical wording there.
Yeah, it might not be labeled right. The second. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I see what you're looking at. The two side on the where it says second floor only.
Right.
That is two bedroom apartments above the 2-story section of the building, and then from that point back to the south, where floors 2, 3, and 4, those will duplicate on the way up.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't realize what you were asking there. And that's all I have from the staff perspective.
Any
Again,
questions?
The applicant can go into more detail.
Any questions for staff and Derek at this point? Okay, I'd like to hear from the applicant, if they so desire.
Okay.
Again, if you would, just state your name and who you're with, for the record.
Sure. My name is Joy Skidmore. I'm here representing Forza. Sorry, I have a presentation. I've been frantically deleting slides because Derek's done such a good job going through all of this that I don't need to do some of the presentation. But okay. So I'll just tell you a little bit about these Forza folks you've been hearing so much about, that Derek keeps mentioning. They're a development company that was established in 2015 by Adam D'Angelo, and their main business model and their mission is to come into communities in central Indiana and identify a need that maybe matches what they develop as well, and then meet with city leaders and partner with the communities in order to develop projects that really represent the vision for those communities. And so that's what they've done here with this project. Adam D'Angelo, as I mentioned, he was the founder. He's not able to be here tonight. He has a lending background. He worked for commercial lenders in central Indiana. And then John Fleming, who is here, is an attorney. And about a couple years ago, I guess I would say, hung up his attorney hat and put on his developer hat, and has been working with Adam, partnered with Adam. Again, my name is Joy Skidmore. I'm with Single Source Real Estate Services. I am the pre-development project manager for this project, so basically responsible for everything from land, once the land is bought, to putting a shovel in the ground and everything in between. And then Brent Mather is here, as Derek mentioned, as the architect on the project. So just a quick portfolio snapshot of some things that Forza has accomplished since they've been in business since 2015. They do have a portion of their business model is to acquire projects and redevelopment and add value both inside and outside of those to to increase, I guess, revenue and also beautify projects and really update projects. This was a ground-up development in LaPel, Indiana. Their single-story apartment model. And there's a picture of some of the interior finishes. So they do high-quality interior finishes, stainless steel appliances, high-quality flooring, granite countertops, and that's pretty typical throughout most of their developments. On the commercial side of things, in Wabash, Indiana, they were successful with several different funding sources on what's known as the Bedford Building. So redeveloping that property, maintaining the historical significance of the building, and making it occupiable again. And then one under development in Zionsville, just as you can see there, in the process of redeveloping that property to hopefully have a distillery that takes over that building. So this proposed project, again, as Derek mentioned, located just south of South Street and along Lebanon Street, just south of Club 39. This is the site plan. We've oriented the building as contemplated in the master plan, and again, to be a continuation of the downtown. So leaving the building pushed up to the right-of-way. However, we have moved it back slightly, and that's really to activate the sidewalk. And so as retail tenants come in, mainly restaurants and things like that, they have the opportunity to add some outdoor seating out in that area. And so we've widened the sidewalk in that area to really activate it and really encourage people to walk the downtown, from downtown and to downtown along the sidewalk. We're also, again, it's an NDOT road. We're going to try for on-street parking in this area as well. And as was previously mentioned, we'll be working with NDOT to try and get a crosswalk across there too. So all of the services and everything being in the rear of the building as well. So this rendering here was shown previously. We do have a step down, 2 stories, next to Club 39, and that is to maintain the structural integrity of that shared wall that's there now. So Brent can go into more detail on it if needed, but basically our structural engineer recommended that we only go to 2 stories just due to the snow load that would be on that building. And so we don't want to have to go into and disturb Club 39 to upgrade that wall. And so this gives us the opportunity to leave that wall in place and still be attached to it. If that makes sense. This is the view as you're coming north toward downtown on 39. So again, really kind of highlighting to the east what could be there. And so we've kind of made a guess at trying to complement and match the architecture on both sides of the road. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it could look like in the future with that permanent phasing. All masonry materials on the front, other than, as he said, the stone veneer around the storefront. And I think we have some metal panel accents and the tower features in between the windows as well. But the tower feature is all brick. It's just in between, above and below the windows, we have some metal panel in there as well. And split face CMU on the back, as he said, and then cement siding on the back of the building. We do want to highlight and really showcase the historical marker that's there on site. Being that Lincoln stopped there, that's a really cool thing. And so we're trying to highlight it. We've been told that there are still rail lines that are there. And so what we hope to do is be able to unearth those rail lines and incorporate them into the project somehow, whether that be setting it down into the sidewalk and having sort of like a railway that looks like it's in the sidewalk in our patio area, or, if they're not in great condition, we can put them inside and incorporate them into the interior design of our residential lobby. So something like that, or we would welcome any other ideas that you guys might have, but that's what we're trying to do with those rail lines. We also, as a nod to the rail line, named it the Brakeman Building, just again to keep the historical significance. And then, as Derek said, just the material selection and the careful thought that went into that, because brick is such a timeless material, and so that's what we're trying to maintain that timeless look and continue downtown. With that, happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay. All right, thank you for your time. One question from me personally, how wide is the sidewalk there in between that residential or the commercial area?
So I believe we have it at 15 feet. It's hard to see on that drawing, but I believe it's 15 feet from the face of the building. Are you saying what is the existing or what it is, or what we proposed?
Do you have to know what the existing is?
I don't, without
Okay.
pulling up the survey, sorry. It's
8?
I'm told it's 8 to 10.
Okay.
It's going to go from 8 to 15 and then narrower at that outset for the other building. You mentioned the possibility of on-street parking, plus the sidewalk being that wide?
Yes. Yep, that is the goal.
So that 15 feet, just to clarify, is with the parking space there. So with
Correct.
that other additional parking space, there's going to be a section that's approximately 20 feet, 21 feet?
Oh, so it's parallel parking? So I think we have it at probably 9 feet wide.
Okay, I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
I really like the idea that it encourages the outdoor living, walking on the sidewalk, the trails. That's awesome. I think it's awesome.
Thanks.
It looks like a railroad cross-arm structure at there. Is that something that you would be putting in the development, or is that just kind of?
Oh, yeah, so this rendering, if we can put it back up. Yeah, so that is sort of a placeholder right now. It's an idea that Brent's team has that we really like and would like to, incorporate into the project. We envision that being some form of artwork there. It's just sort of shown as a placeholder on this rendering, but we'll have something there. If I don't know that it's going to be that tall or, look exactly like that, but that's what we're trying to highlight, is that we want to put something in that plaza. Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. Public art downtown is something that we really could use more of, so I think that could be a nice spot for that.
I know the renderings can be misleading, but you feel this is pretty much what we'll see?
Yes. Cool.
And did I see that there was a doorway going from on the second floor to the roof of the second? Will that be activated then, that roof of that second building, or that two-story building? Just out of curiosity.
So that's still under debate on the project. It will be roof access for sure. And we hope to eventually create an outdoor sort of roof garden in that area. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I think the design complements the downtown very well, especially coming in from the south. Done an excellent job mimicking the heights of adjacent buildings. The facing of them, again, complementing the rest of the structures in the area. Obviously, you're professionals, it's not your first rodeo, but I was impressed to see these renderings a few weeks ago.
It has a sense of continuity, but enough interest that it really makes you look. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And again, too bad we have to tear the buildings down to get to this, but it's needed and it's should definitely help. I'm concerned about how you're going to connect to their building, how you're going to tear the old off without hurting their building, but that's up to you guys, I guess. That would be a concern.
Any other questions from the applicant at this time? Any questions from the public? Any comments? Any other final comments from staff? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Commission. Appreciate you guys just taking a look at this. Like I said, we know this is a kind of a big step for the community, but I hope it's something that, if you remember the very first conceptual project that came out, this is different than that, right? So it kind of reflects kind of the ongoing discussions we've had. We do want to make this, this is kind of the entry point to our downtown. So as we kind of try to bring back kind of the historic nature of that corridor, we've really tried to work very closely with the developer to find something that kind kind of is inspired by the past, but also will look good for generations to come. Because as we know, when these buildings go up, they're there for a long time, right? And so, hopefully 50 years from now, people are seeing this as a historic building as well too. And I think that's the way we've kind of tried to work with them in designing this. So appreciate your consideration tonight.
Maybe down the road, it's neat the fact the railway is being tied into this. And somehow, so that people realize that would be awesome. Maybe, I don't know, a plaque somewhere.
Well, and I think, it mentioned the wider sidewalk, and a lot of people walk around.
Yeah.
Right now, people may not, you kind of drive by that Lincoln marker sign on 39, you kind of blink, you miss it. This may be an opportunity because we're redeveloping this, people actually can interact with that and see something, historic happened here, and there's a marker to prove that. So I think it's something that's hopefully increases interaction, and it's not just a blank lot, like it used to be there. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, discussion?
How soon could it be done?
This is the time. Ready to move in April 1st?
There you go.
No? Okay. I just glanced over at one of these printed renderings, and just out of curiosity, that Greenscape is something that can be lacking in developments such as these when you have so much aggregate in the design. Is there any plans? I see maybe one or two trees, but this doesn't also show the inset parking. Is there any thoughts on any type of greenscape there within this plan?
I'll address that a little bit, and I'll let them do it as well. There is further discussions, and part of our agreement says that they will work with the city to determine the actual design of the streetscape, such that it meets anything that we have required or we desire along there. I think we're going to do our best to mimic what we've done on the square downtown as much as possible. So again, we're trying to continue that downtown down South Lebanon Street. So we want to use the same furnishings, the same type of landscape boxes, those sorts of things, so you can see some continuation there. So yeah, there's ongoing discussions of exactly how that's designed, but that's part of the agreement. They'll work with us to figure out the exact design. But I totally agree with you that we want to make sure there's some element of green along that streetscape too.
I don't think this is maybe necessarily in our scope, but is there any discussion in replacing the sidewalk from the northern end of this project to South Street, that entire space?
There's the potential that we might go all the way up to the alley and replace it all the way along there. If we're gonna redo it in front of this building, we might as well at least go up to the alley and continue all the way up there. So yeah, we've been talking internally in the planning department about how we can get that accomplished while they're doing this project and just replace it all in that entire section.
Okay, thank you, Ben. All right, with that, I will make a motion that we approve the COA for 222 and 224, and I'm going to pause here. Derek, just a point of clarification, on here it asks for 310. I don't know if that need to actually be included in this COA since it's not in the same build here.
No, it doesn't have it. It's not
Okay.
necessarily an assigned address. I don't think in the USPS world. It's just an approximate address for the parking lot, just so I can identify, a number to that parking lot.
Okay, well, we'll put it in. So certificate of appropriateness for 222, 224, and 310 South Lebanon Street. And I'll see this in a second.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any further discussion? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I'm excited to see this project come to fruition. Is there any other business to come before the board at this time? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be in February. And I did not know the date, so I just